What's going on, YouTube? This is the SG1 Sports SEC football channel, and we're going to give you the top 10 players for the Ole Miss Rebels in 2019. And as you go through this video and you compare these 10 players to LSU's top 10 or Alabama's or Auburn's, the teams that we've done so far, you can see a pretty good drop-off when you go to Ole Miss. And that's why I actually have them maybe as the bottom team in the SEC West. But there's still plenty of talent on this roster. And if some young guys step up, Ole Miss could surprise some people in 2019. We shall see. We're going to start with number 10. That is a JUCO weak side defensive end. He was the number 3 JUCO weak side defensive end, according to 24/7 Sports in the country. He's an early enrollee. Sam Williams, I expect him to maybe make an impact on this defensive line right away. The strength of this Ole Miss team is probably going to be their front seven. You've got some young talent on the offense, and if those guys click and it comes together, especially at the quarterback position, they could have a really good offense. But I think the front seven of this defense is going to be the strength of the team, and they may need a new face like Sam Williams to help them out. The secondary is going to be the weakness of the defense. They lost a lot of talent. Myles Hartsfield is back. You look at his numbers from last year: 41 tackles, defended 7 passes, also had a forced fumble. But again, he is really going to be the main guy that they have back in that secondary because of all the losses that they had. So it's going to be up to him to be, I think, the leader of that secondary, and there will be a lot of opportunities, I think, for him to make some plays. And so we're going to put him at number 9 for our Ole Miss top 10 players. Move on to number 8. We're going to go to the offensive side. And how about wide receiver Elijah Moore? Last season, 36 catches, 398 yards receiving, had a couple of touchdowns as well. But you look at the players that they lost that have gone on to the NFL or graduated, and they lost a lot of their production at the wide receiver position. Elijah Moore is back, though, and I think he will be the go-to guy for them. He will be their leading receiver in 2019. I expect him to have a big year, probably 1,000 yards receiving. And again, I think he'll be the leader of the wide receivers. Back to defense for number 7, Mohamed Sanogo. Just a tackling machine last season, 112 tackles. That's a lot of tackles. 6.5 tackles for loss, had a sack, had a couple of forced fumbles. So he's a playmaker and gets around the football. And I think he's going to be the leader there at that linebacker position for this defense. And they do return their linebackers from last season. Like I said, I think the front seven is going to be the strength of this defense for sure, and probably this whole team. And I think he'll be a big part of that. We move on to number 6, and that is Matt Corral. You look at last season, he got to play a little bit, 16 to 22, 239 yards, but really just not any meaningful snaps. He did play some in the Egg Bowl, but he was the number 4 pro-style quarterback in the 2018 class. Has some really talented players in that class, like Trevor Lawrence. But I think he has to really emerge for them this season. He's a very talented kid. If he can realize his potential, I think this offense could get back to being very good. But he is going to be probably the biggest key for this Ole Miss team in 2019. At number 5, we go to Josiah Coatney on the defensive line. 63 tackles last season, 4 tackles for loss. Had a sack, had a forced fumble in there as well. A very talented player playing the defensive tackle position. And that might be the strength, actually. We talk about the front seven. You might even could go as far as to say that it's the defensive line that is going to be the strength of this team and this defense. They've got some pretty talented players there, and I think he is one of them. We've got him at number 5. At number 4, we've got Alex Givens. He is going to be the leader on the offensive line. He's got 3 years of starting experience. He started every game last season. Again, he's a senior. He's going to have to be the leader. They lost a lot on that offensive line from last season. So I expect him to be a big part of the offensive line. And again, it's tough to really figure out where you're going to put an offensive lineman on this list because there's no stats and, you know, how do you compare? But when you've just got one guy that's kind of above everyone else on that offensive line, I feel like he's going to be really important for this team. At number 3, we got Scottie Phillips. Ran for almost 1,000 yards last season, 928 rushing yards. But check it out, 6.1 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns. Really surprised a lot of people, I think, including myself. They had a pretty decent run game going last year. I think they might run it a little bit more in 2019 with the Jordan Ta'amu gone. So I think Phillips could have even more opportunities. The problem is, they've got the big freshman coming in. They've got some other talented backs as well. So he might split time, but I do think he's their third best player. And then at number 2, we go to Benito Jones. 34 tackles on the season. That number is not great, but he did have 9 tackles for loss, had 3 sacks, can eat up blocks, a very talented player on the defensive line. There was some talk of him actually going into the NFL early, but he decided to come back for his senior season, so I think that's going to be big for Ole Miss. And like I said, the defensive line is probably the strength of this team, at least looking at it right now. We've already given you one guy. Now we give you Jones. And guess what? Our number 1 player is also on the defensive line, and that is Qaadir Sheppard. Check out the numbers from last season. He had 48 tackles, 10 tackles for loss. I believe he led the team in tackles for loss. 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. So he's a guy that was around the football a lot, made a lot of plays. And yes, he did lead the team in tackles for loss at 10. Benito Jones was at 9. Those were the top 2 guys, and they're both back, and also they're at the top of this list. So I think they are going to be key for this defense. And again, you need to get some pressure when you're going to be young in the secondary when you're trying to stop the pass. I think they'll be pretty good against the run. Stopping the pass will be very interesting. And then you got to have young guys step up on offense. That will be the key there. So Ole Miss, I think, could have a pretty good team, pretty good season, but there's also potential there for them to not have that great of a year if some of the younger players don't step up, because they don't really return a ton of production and a ton of talent. Again, you compare this video to our LSU video or Alabama or some of those other teams, and there is a pretty big drop-off when you look at these players. So we'll see how it plays out for Ole Miss in 2019. Tomorrow we will do Texas A&M, and then next week we head to the SEC East, and we'll do that division in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Florida and then Georgia and then so on and so forth. So that's the plan here. Be adding more content every single day to the channel. If you have not subscribed already and you're an SEC football fan, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports SEC Football Channel.